graders, many of whom we've been working with all year. And in the fall and winter for this class, we do all sorts of topics, and we don't worry about putting together a performance. We just learn about all the different things that go into putting together a show here on the stage at the Rose. But during the spring, we do something called Spring Breakout. And sometimes we want to call it Spring Breakdown, because we try to put together a show in 10 classes, which really is only about 10 hours worth of time. And what we've done this year is we've taken a folk tale that comes from the Cherokee people of the Southeast, or originally of the Southeastern United States, and we have turned it is a legend and fable that's been passed down for a long time, and we have turned it into the production that you will be seeing this afternoon. I want you to feel free to take pictures during the show. If you could just make sure that they are not happening with a flash. There should be plenty of light in here, so I don't think you will need a flash. But you won't want to be so focused on your camera that you miss out on these young people's great artistic performance that they're about to share. All right. So without any, let's do a couple of housekeeping things. If you need to leave the theater for any reason, that's perfectly fine. You just come down on the stage and walk right back out the doors that you came in. The nearest restrooms are on the mezzanine level, which is a zig and a zag down the stairs. There should be a big M down there, and they're right above the main lobby. You need to do that. Otherwise, we hope that you enjoy the performance. Are you guys ready? Yeah, excellent, very good. So without further ado, we proudly present the Cherokee story of the Big Ball Game. Can I have everybody get into your position for the forest at the beginning of the show? Our story is called
The Big Ball Game.
And it comes from
The Cherokee people.
And this story takes place long, long ago, so if you'll join us and give us a 3, 2, 1 curtain, we will begin it for you. 3, 2, 1, curtain! Long, long ago, in these woods of the southeastern United States, the Cherokee people lived. And before the Cherokee people lived here, this forest was full of beautiful trees and beautiful animals. And if you stood in the forest and listened, you would hear the breeze blowing through the trees just like this. And you would see the leaves shaking in those breezes just like this. And if you looked very closely, you would see all sorts of animals that were here before the Cherokee people came. Can everyone take a pose like your animal? Excellent. Now these animals, just like the Cherokee people, enjoy many of the same things that the Cherokee do today, including all of their foods and all of their games. And one of the favorite games of the Cherokee people was the game of lacrosse. Lacrosse is a sport that is played by holding a stick with a net on the end of it. And you toss a ball back and forth to your fellow players, move the ball down the field, and score goals by throwing it into a net. And the animals of the forest, just like the Cherokee people, loved this game. Now, some of those animals that you would see were four-legged beasts. Can I see my four-legged beasts? Excellent. And can you march over to your side of the forest? Now, those four-legged beasts were huge fans of the game of lacrosse because they thought in order to play this game, you needed four strong legs. But also in these woods were the birds of the air, gigantic birds of prey. Can I have my birds fly to their end of the forest? Now, the birds had no use for four strong legs, but they thought to play this game, you needed two very powerful wings. Now, not everyone in the community was worried about lacrosse all the time. In fact, there were a group of insects, the dragonflies. Can I have my dragonflies retreat to your nest? Now, the dragonflies were very wise creatures, and they didn't always play sports with the others, but they did pay attention to what was going on in the community. And besides all of these animals, there were a lot of little creatures scattering around. Can I have those creatures scattered to your side of the stage? Now, these little creatures were a little too small to get involved in the sport of lacrosse, but they did enjoy hearing the news about it, and the more they heard, the more intrigued they were. Now, the problem with this game of lacrosse is it was something that everyone in the woods got obsessed about. It was almost like living in Nebraska with Cornhusker football. And the birds and the beasts all thought they were the best players of the game. Sometimes you would see the beasts romping through the forest. And they would come to a clearing and you could hear them talking about lacrosse. They would make their animal sounds just like this. and they would talk about how great the game of lacrosse was. And the Wildcat thought he was the best player. Why did the Wildcat think he was the best player? The strongest of the team. But the deer, with her 4 strong legs, thought she was the best player.
I'm the best because I can hear the players behind.
You can hear the players coming from behind. And the bear, of course, was very powerful with his 4 legs, and she said,
I'm the best at lacrosse because I can stand on 2 legs.
she can stand on 2 legs. So they would roar their loudest roars, and they would go back to their side of the forest arguing about who was the best player the whole time. Well, sometimes if you looked up, you would see the birds flying through the treetops. And they would land on a branch in the middle of the forest, and they would talk about why birds were the best lacrosse players. And the falcon would say,
I am the best at lacrosse because poor Wildcat has given me quite a song.
stars in other games, and of course, that makes you a good player. But what did the eagle say?
I am the best lacrosse player because I have strong wings so I can swoop across the field and score.
Absolutely swooping down the field to score. And what did the hawk have to say about his skills?
I'm the best lacrosse player because I can glide down the field and score.
Excellent. And they would make squawking bird sounds like this. And they would head back to their side of the forest. Now all of this lacrosse began to make the Dragonfly Council very nervous, and they would come forward to the middle of the woods. They would worry about all of these strong feelings about lacrosse. They were worried that this game could be bad for the community if people got too obsessed with it. And this dragonfly said,
I'm worried that everything will fall apart.
oh, and what did this dragonfly say?
So, if someone gets hurt,
Someone could get hurt playing the game. And what did this dragonfly say?
if they could hurt someone else.
They could even hurt someone else. So the dragonflies began to really think about what might happen if this got into a big argument in their community. They flew back to their nest to continue to ponder the problem. Well, wouldn't you know it, one day those beasts were marching through the woods. And the birds were flying through the woods at the same time. And they confronted each other in the middle of the woods, and they got into a huge argument about lacrosse and who the best players were. The bees said, we're the best lacrosse players.
We're the best lacrosse players.
To play this game, you need 4 strong legs.
You need 4 strong legs.
And they stomped their hooves and paws on the ground like this. Very fierce. And they looked up to the treetops, and the birds said, nuh-uh. We're the best lacrosse players.
We're the best lacrosse players.
To play this game, you need 2 powerful wings.
To play this game, you need 2 powerful wings.
And they cawed with their big bird voices like this. And it went back and forth for quite a while. 4 legs,
4 legs.
2 wings.
2 wings. 4 legs. 2 wings. 4 legs. 2 wings.
And finally, the Dragonfly Council overheard the commotion, and they came flying forward into the middle of the battle. And they said, that is enough.
That is enough.
This game is tearing our community apart.
This game is tearing our community apart.
We need to settle this issue once and for all.
We need to settle this issue once and for all.
Tomorrow morning,
Tomorrow morning,
we will meet on the lacrosse field,
we will meet on the lacrosse field.
and we will have a huge contest.
And we will have a huge contest.
Whoever wins
Whoever wins
will be declared lacrosse champions.
will be declared lacrosse champion.
That is all.
That is all.
Well, the birds and the beasts were ready to go. The beast said, we're going to win
We're gonna win.
because we've got 4 legs.
We have 4 legs.
And the bird said, no,
No,
we're going to win
we're gonna win.
because we've got 2 wings.
We got 2 wings.
And they went back to their separate ends of the forest to start their training. Now those birds flew up to the treetops, and they knew they were going to have to work out very hard in order to win this battle and be declared champions. So what did this bird do to get ready for the big game?
Wing up.
Wing ups right there on the branch. And what did this bird do to get ready? Pulling wings out of the wing machine, like one of those Nautilus types of machines to build things up. And what did the hawk do? Lifting things, absolutely lifting rocks up in the treetop. Meanwhile, on the other end of the forest, those beasts were getting ready. What did the deer do to get ready for the big game? Lifting boulders like weights to build up her strength. What did the wildcat do? One-handed push-ups, of course. What did the bear do? Regular push-ups. Very good, excellent. Well, all the commotion in the forest got our little creatures very excited. I bet you thought we forgot about them, didn't you? No, hop up for me, little creatures. They ran to the center of the woods, and they were all excited about the big ball game. This one said, what are you excited about? Do you want to play some lacrosse? She said, I want to play lacrosse.
It sounds like fun.
Excellent. What did this one say?
It feels like the funnest game on the planet.
Absolutely. What did this one say? It looks fun. So they decided if they were going to get on the action, they would need to find a team. So the little creature ran over to where the dragonflies lived. And they lined up outside of the dragon floor and they knocked on their nest like this. And the dragonflies came out. And they said, what can we do for you, friends?
What can we do for you, friends?
And the little creature said, we want to play lacrosse. And the dragonfly said, well, let us get some information. So this dragonfly asked them, how many legs do you have? And so they counted. And what did they answer? 4. These little mice-like creatures had 4 legs. And what did the next dragonfly ask? How many wings do you have? So they looked and they counted. And they said, no wings at all. They were little mice-like creatures who scurried around on the ground. And finally, the last one said, you should be on the beast team because you have 4 legs and no wings. So the little creature said, thank you. And they headed over to where the beasts were. Oh, and they actually got a map with some very important directions. You don't want to get lost in these woods. Excellent. So they wandered over to where the beasts were working out. And when they got there, they saw those big, strong creatures, and they were a little nervous. But they knew they wanted to try out this game of lacrosse. And so they said, excuse me, we would like to join your team. And those beasts stood up on their hind legs, looked right at those little bitty creatures, and they pointed and laughed. They said, you can't be on our team.
You can't be on our team.
Why can't they be on your team?
You're too small.
You're too small. Why can't they be on your team?
So tiny, we'll probably step on you.
Oh, so tiny you'll probably get stepped on.
You're so tiny, we won't even help us get a point.
Won't even be able to help us get a point. You're so tiny. So they said, get out of here and leave us alone.
Leave us alone.
Well, the little ones were not only had their feelings hurt, but they were feeling a little angry. So they said, fine, we'll go join the other team. And the beast said, go ahead.
Go ahead.
We don't care.
We don't care.
Well, with that, those little ones turned their little tails and they started to march across the woods. Now the thing is, their paws were really tiny and it took them most of the rest of the afternoon and right into the evening to get over to the birds' training camp. And when they got to the birds' training camp, the birds were not working out anymore. Instead, they had gotten out their celebration drums and they were playing them loudly in a big pep rally, just like this. Those little ones looked way up in the treetops and they got very nervous because that loud sound was kind of scary. But they knew if they were going to be in the team, they had to start climbing. So they started climbing up the branches. And soon they got to the top. And when they did, they said, excuse me. And the birds stopped drumming. And they looked right at them with their sharp talons and beaks, pointed their wings at them and said, are you spying on us?
Are you spying on us?
You have 4 legs.
You have 4 legs.
The little ones got very scared and they said, no, 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 no. We just want to be on your team.
We just want to be on your team.
And the birds pointed their wings at them and laughed. They said, you can't be on our team.
You can't be on our team.
You don't have any wings.
You don't have any wings.
Well, those little creatures were so tired and so frustrated and so sick of being rejected, they sat right down on a branch and they started to cry. And the birds felt a little bad about it. They didn't mean to hurt their feelings, but everyone on their team needed wings. So they thought and thought and thought, and suddenly they had an idea.
Hey, maybe we could cut out wings from the dog.
Yeah, what did you do up with them?
We go onto their backs.
Oh, very good. Do you think they'd be able to fly?
Maybe.
Maybe. So they took their talons and they went right into the top of their leather drums and they cut out some wings. Now the thing is, birds are good at using wings. They're not so good at making wings. And the wings they cut out had all of these jaggedy, weird shapes. They were not like the wings of birds at all. And they flew right behind those little creatures. And they took their leather wings and they took their beaks and they pecked them right into their backs. And the little ones squeaked a little because it hurt a bit. And then the birds flew back to their branch. And they said, "Go ahead and try out your new wings."
Go ahead.
So the little ones got up on the branch and they jumped off. 1, 2, 3, jump. And sure enough, they started to flap those wings. But the problem was those jaggedy little wings made them fly ziggity-zaggedy in all different directions. You couldn't tell where they were going. They were almost flying like they couldn't see where they were going. And eventually they flew back and landed on the branch. And they said, "How did you like our flying?" And the birds shook their big heads. And they said, "That was terrible. You don't look like you know how to fly at all." And the little one said, "Can we please be on your team? We have wings." And the bird said, "Well, maybe you can play in the second half
Well, maybe you could play the second half.
when we're already winning."
Already.
And the little ones were so excited, they said, "Yay!" And they flew over to the bench where they camped all night long waiting for the next day's game. Well, sure enough, the sun rose, and it was time for the big ball game. The dragonflies flew to the center of the field, and they brought the lacrosse ball with them. Got it? Watch your step over the footboards. And the beasts lined up on their side of the field with their lacrosse equipment. And the birds lined up on their side of the field with their lacrosse equipment. And everyone looked very fierce and intense. And the dragonfly said, "It's time for the tournament.
It's time for the tournament.
We want a good, clean game."
We want a good, clean game.
And this one said, "No cheating." And this one said, "No fighting."
Okay.
And this one said, "Let's have fun."
Let's have fun.
And the birds and the beasts in their fiercest voices said, "Let's play ball." So the dragonflies got the ball and they threw it up into play, and then they scrambled out of the way so they could be referee the game. And wouldn't you know it, when it came down, it landed right in the wildcat's net. And the wildcat started to move down the field with his 4 strong legs, and he threw it to the bear. And it went over to the bear, and she started to move down with her strong paws, and she threw it back to the deer. And the deer galloped and galloped. But the problem was all those 4 paws and 4 hooves had stirred up such a cloud of dust that by the time she threw it into the goal, it missed and went over completely, and they didn't get the point. They were very disappointed as they marched back to their side of the field. The dragonflies came out to start the next point. And they threw the ball up and scrambled out of the way so they could get set on. And this time, wouldn't you know it, it came right down in the falcon's net. And he began to flap and fly and zoom down the field, and he threw it to the hawk. And he caught it and he flapped and he flew higher and higher, and he threw it to the eagle. And she flew higher and higher and higher, so high that when she threw it into the goal, it sailed far over it and missed completely. The birds went back to their end of the field very sad and defeated. It was back and forth like this the whole afternoon. No one could score a point. And finally, the dragonflies, worried the game would never end, rushed forward. And they said, called a timeout, just like this.
Timeout.
They said, "We're going to let the teams huddle up
We're going to let the team huddle
and come up with a new strategy.
and come up with a new strategy.
Whoever wins the first point,
Whoever wins the first point,
when the game returns,
when the game returns,
will be declared champions."
will be declared champion.
And so they flew back to their referee stand. The birds huddled up on their side of the field. The beasts huddled up on their side of the field. Everyone trying to come up with a way to win the game. Well, the little ones ones knew it just might be their chance. So they flew over to the bird tunnel with their rackets, get your rackets. And they lined up right over here. And they said, "Can we finally play?"
Can we finally play?
The birds looked at each other very nervously and they said, "Okay, we're not winning anyway." So the little ones gave a big cheer, and they ran out onto the field and they lined up right in front of those birds. And the birds came in behind them, and the bees lined up on the other side of the field. And when they saw those little creatures with their ridiculous-looking wings, the bees pointed and laughed at them like this. They said, "Oh my goodness! You let them on your team?" The little ones hunkered down. They didn't let all that negativity get to them. They were determined to have a good showing in the game. The dragonflies came forward. And they shouted, "Time in!"
Time in!
Very good. They threw the ball. Well, wouldn't you know, when that ball came down, it landed right in the net of one of those little creatures. And those little creatures started to flap their little wings for all they were worth. But as you remember, when they flew, they zigged. And they zagged. The bees couldn't tell which way they were going as they zigged and zagged down the field. Timothy threw it to Dylan. And Dylan zigged and zagged down the field. And he threw it to Nika. And she zigged and zagged down the field. And finally Nika threw it to Brennan. And Brennan flapped and zigged and zagged. And he zigged and zagged right between those bees and scored the point that won the game. Excited and they made a sound like this. The bees were very disappointed and they made a sound like this. But all of the creatures learned an important lesson that day. Can I have my little creatures line up right here in the middle? Dragonflies, can you stand up on the referee stand? What the creatures didn't know of these woods is that day they had created a brand new animal. They had created the very first bats. And bats have wings that are not like bird wings. And when they flap and fly, they kind of zig and zag all over the place. Because bats can't see very well, and they use radar to get from place to place. But the animals learned an important lesson that day. And that is, you may be small, and you may not fly like everyone else, but you can still be a big winner. And that is the lesson of with our birds and with our bees. Can you guys give a big bow? Raise your hands up. Give a big bow. This afternoon, we are going to send the wings home with you, but we do need to keep the head pieces so they can be used for other shows. And if you guys will just give me your rackets, I'll go ahead and collect those. If you would like to pose for a picture for your family in front of some of the scenery that you painted, you certainly can do that. And if you'll just make sure to give your headpiece to Stephanie on the way out. These are safety pins in the back of our t-shirt collars, so just be aware of that if you're trying to take them off. So you don't take off more than you meant to, okay?